All right, it's about 10:05. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I think some other folks may be joining us as we move along here. But by way of introductions to get things started, my name is Mark Kleinschmidt. I'm the President and CEO of the Arundel Chamber of Commerce, and today we're putting together a virtual town hall to discuss the county's General Development Plan, the GDP. As many of you know, the GDP will set in place guidelines and policies to help the county administer its function as a administrator of land use and permitting and so forth and zoning. It has some long-term ramifications in terms of what it is. And it will control, regulate, protect development. So that's an important function. So the process that we'll use today is got Stephen Hyatt is going to give kind of an overview of the plan, the approval process, the comment process, talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to open it up to folks who are on the call for comments. What we're trying to do at the chamber is we are going to put together a series, a document of comments that we will submit to the county by November 15th. They have a comment period for the GDP up until November 15th. So what we wanted to do with the town hall today is to get input from our members. So we're looking to get that part of that today, and then we'll work on drafting a doc or a legislative committee before we turn it into the county on November 15th. After Stephen gets done, to try and help us stay focused, if anyone has specific comments and things they want to say, if you could just go in the chat box and indicate that you want to speak and add some dialogue to comments and thoughts about the GDP, just put it in the chat box that you want to chat or talk, and I'll call on you. That way we can kind of have an orderly process here. We're going to try and keep this till about an hour, so we'll run to about 11 o'clock or so. So anyway, so if you've got some things you want to share, indicate so in the chat box. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to give us an overview.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Stephen Hyatt. I'm an attorney and lobbyist with Hyatt & Weber here in Annapolis, and our firm has been involved in at least three, I think this is our fourth, maybe fifth run at the General Development Plan in Arundel County. I've been actively involved in the process here. I think it started in May of 2017 under the previous county executive administration, and the current county executive, he adjusted course a little bit, but they are moving forward, and I'm going to give you a little overview of where we are in the process and try and share my screen with you here. And I have a couple items to show you. So just to start, the jurisdiction municipality in the state undertake these planning processes, these guiding documents every 8 years. It used to be every 10 years, and then I guess a couple legislative sessions ago, they changed it to every 8. They thought it was more appropriate. And the General Development Plan document basically serves as a guiding document that lays the framework for infrastructure growth and future needs, environmental concerns, health and safety concerns, development regulations, and land use goals and changes. And then ultimately what will happen at the very end will be comprehensive zoning, where after all of the community input and the process has been fully vetted and approved at each stage, the county will then change existing zoning to match up with what's been recommended. So what I have on my screen here is the county's General Development Plan website. It has all the resources you would need you can see under the updates of September 30th that where we currently are in the process is reviewing the draft plan, and there's links to it, volume 1. I'll show you some slides of that actual document in a moment. And then volume 2, that has a lot of data. It's like 300 pages, and it's useful if you want to get into the minutia and the nitty gritty, if you will, but you can leave that up to other folks like me and some of the other lawyers and engineers in the county that are really involved in the process, and really stick with volume 1 if you prefer. And then most importantly, on this page, you can see below that in that same section, it says, please submit comments using this online questionnaire. This county executive, and I'll show you real quick, this is a overview of the community participation that's happened in this GDP process. A ton of community involvement. So your input really will make a difference. And I hope you have a little bit more of an understanding of what this document does as I elaborate on it. But just know that the county executive and the current administration cares very much about community members and stakeholders and their input, and you all are those people. So your input is really what will guide the final version of this document. And again, this thing only happens once every 8 years now, so you're going to be stuck with it for better or worse. If you don't participate in it, then you really don't have too much room to complain, if you will. So really want you to participate. With that said, I'll show you a little bit about the process here. Go back to the county's website. So the process, in 2017, there's been well over 1.5 years of public comments, town halls, virtual and in person. And there's a citizens advisory committee. It's made up of citizens from all various townships and communities in Arundel County, and they've made their recommendations and put together a report, and it's all incorporated into this draft plan. After they made that recommendation, the big phase was what's called the land use change application process. And essentially, there's 2 types of land use, if you will. There's the underlying land use, which says this is generally, by way of example, commercial land. So then you get into the C1, 2, 3, and 4. But you can't have zoning in the commercial designation, C1, 2, 3, and 4, if your land use is residential. So that change process was to get rid of any inconsistencies, or if there's been a change, let's say, a bunch of recent development and something's designated as residential land use, maybe it should be commercial. And that process happened earlier this year. Well, it happened at the end of last year, and there was a comment period that ended earlier this year. And that is all incorporated into the This is the proposed draft land use plan. This is all in the general development plan, the draft plan document, page 34 and 35. And it gives you, it's important because at the very end of the process, as I mentioned a moment ago, there will be comprehensive zoning. If your underlying land use doesn't match up, see this, a cart before the horse issue, got to have the land use process finalized before comp zoning. So in the process, The land use change application period is closed. The county is currently taking comments on the draft land use plan through November 15th. And we encourage you to comment. We're going to comment as well. And then once that draft plan, and this version will go to what's known as the Public Advisory Board. Again, a group of appointed citizens that have some background in planning, on the governmental level. And there will be additional public hearings. They make recommendations for any changes or approval. And then in early 21, the plan will get sent to the county council for their review, additional public hearings, and their approval. That should happen of 2021. And then, as I mentioned several times now, after this whole plan gets approved, there's still another portion of the plan that needs to be implemented, and that is comprehensive zoning. And that's going to happen small area plans. And I think there was, 16 or so in the past, and it was a little disconnected. There were some issues with it. Some people think it worked, some people disagree. This year, or this go around to do is create these regional plans, and I'll show you what they look like. So these are the proposed region areas, and the county intends to go through them. I'll try and show you here in terms of process, 3 at a time. And here's the proposed timeline. Rezone the 3 regions that they actually complete, and so it'll kind of be a rolling process. And some people might not get their areas, their property rezoned for quite a while because this area here, that's really, it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year process for each one of these groupings of regional plans. So at the outside date, that last group, 6, 8, and 9, alternatively, may not be rezoned for, I guess it's 6 to potentially 8 years. So it's a long process, but this is a way that the community can really be involved on a more granular level, make sure that everybody's voices are heard. Again, this is a pretty long and involved document, but I'll just go through a couple of areas I recommend you all review. There's basically 4 goal and policy areas. One's the natural environment, which is here, pages 22 to 23 in the plan. And there's the built environment, preparing for that. That's more of the development arm of the communities and healthy economy. So these are the goals and policies for the natural environment, which I recommend you read. And then you have the built environment goals and policies, which are pretty involved, because this is not only land development, but it's also, and traffic concerns get addressed in here, and capital improvement programs, and really the lifeblood of how people get around and get to businesses, get to and from work. And home deal. And this is very, very involved, and obviously has the most number of goals set for it. And then there's the healthy communities, goals and policies, Obviously, health concerns and prioritizing individuals is important and a priority. So I recommend you go through those. And then finally, the healthy economy, goals and policies can be, and yes, it's a pretty lengthy document. The bulk of it, you can see that it shows 90 some pages. The bulk of it, sorry for scrolling so much, but it's these strategies that line up with the policies and goals. And there's about 50 or so pages of these specific strategies for each of the goal and policy areas that I mentioned, and they're a little more specific. So if you have concerns and recommendations, it's in these strategies to see if something's actually been considered. If not, that's where I really encourage you to provide comments on the county's website right here. Now, it's a lot to take in a very short period of time, but it's a very important document. The big thing is any type of development or infrastructure needs, if you need sewer to your business or your property, that will be approved unless it is consistent with this plan. If the county finds any inconsistencies, that gives them reason to say, we don't have to approve this, you need to change, or you missed out, you have to wait. So it's be considered, and that you consider what the future looks like for you and your surrounding neighborhood and communities and where you live and work, so that the changes get incorporated appropriately. And the last thing I'll say is a little more specific about the plan. It's very focused on the natural environment, and that is very understandable. There's a real concern that we preserve this incredible place that we live in, and it's not to just ignore environmental concerns. Not saying that. It's just very, very heavily weighed in that regard, and a little out of balance against growth and infrastructure needs. And the problem there being out of balance is there's a lack of flexibility, and that will result in potentially lack of revenue to pay for these needed capital improvements for aging infrastructure, traffic mitigation, stormwater management facilities. And then ultimately what's going to happen in the not too distant future is the county is going to have to pay for those things, and it's going to impact the average homeowner in the form of tax hikes, which we've already seen last budget, and I expect we'll see some more. There are alternatives to that, and that's smart planned growth, which really can be incorporated into this document. So, I encourage everybody to review this. Have until November 15th, a little more than 2 weeks to submit those comments. The other thing I would encourage you to do is talk to your council person. If you don't know who they are, you can go to the Anne Arundel County website and type your address in, and it tells you, and get their feedback on the plan, because they've seen the draft plan and they ultimately get to approve it, and they can make some changes. So I would encourage you to review this, speak to them, even reach out to Planning Mark, and be involved, because it's a big deal. Not a lot of people historically have participated and then ultimately are frustrated when something changes and they didn't know about it. This is your chance, your opportunity. So I hope that's helpful in some way. And I'm going to take some questions, or Mark has, I guess, a few. I don't know if anybody's commented here. But
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen, the overview. And just in terms of the timeline, the county will take comments up until November 15th. And what's the estimated time that county council will start taking it to review? And then I guess they'll have public hearings and a vote on the plan?
that's correct. Yeah, the council will get this maybe 3 months, so January-ish, depending on any other changes. But I think Planning Advisory Board will get it first. They'll make their recommendation for changes or approval. And then the county council will have probably several months of deliberations and work sessions and public hearing. And there will be opportunity for more comment at that point.
Yeah, so this is an important process. And as you can see, we've talked, Stephen highlighted it well, the process, and it's big in terms of volume, the documents itself and the things that we have to provide. And that's one reason the county chambers, we're going to work to try and, be involved and add some substantive comments by November 15th. For general discussion. But prior to that, I wanted to ask if anyone wants to, just before we get into anything specific, add their general thoughts or comments about the GDP at this point. Box if somebody wants to add some comments, so I can call on you. Just again, trying to have an orderly discussion. All right, so it looks like we've got a shy group. So what we'll do to get started is I'll start a dialogue on this. Is the value of the GDP is to help guide growth, and growth needs to happen to promote economic activity, which generates jobs and everyone's livelihood. But however, at the same time, sources. Anne Arundel County, compared to a lot of other communities, has a lot more going for it, more concerns in terms of the environment, in terms of the relationship with the Chesapeake Bay and the multiple rivers and the watersheds throughout the county. So what do y'all think of? Is this plan at this point, from what you've heard, too far on the environmental side and not enough on the economic growth side? Thoughts? But David looked like you're unmuted. What do you think?
Mark, my take is this is so, I don't want to use the word bureaucratic, but it is so big and unwieldy, as Stephen just pointed out. It's hard to grasp the pages this is from beginning to end, but when someone throws to a typical constituent of the county, and I mean not someone here, let's just say a 50-page GDP, me to be overwhelming and intimidating. And judging by the lack of, if this webinar is an example, judging by the relative very large importance of this, but the relatively low turnout of the number of participants, it seems to me to be bearish and that word, but almost bullish in a way. It's going through, so it's unmanageable. That's just one man's opinion. I'm not speaking for the chamber, I'm just speaking for myself. Said that correctly, but I don't know if I made my point correctly.
Mark, I'll respond. if you don't mind. I think you're right. It's inherently a partisan document because it's whatever is in control gets to control the conversation. So yeah, that's true. But I think what we can do, and the purpose of doing this webinar, is to educate as many people as are willing to listen that this thing is going on. And of getting the message out, I think there's been more participation in this general development plan than in past plans, and that's a product, I think, of the current administration's style. But typically the folks that participate aren't the ones, historically at least, who really have a stake outside of, they have traffic concerns in one area, or they don't want something happening in their neighborhood. High level view across the whole county, participate. And that's where we come in, need to educate folks, need to talk to people and tell them what's going on, give them a bit of an overview, chamber and professionals like myself and some engineers to review it, digest it, summarize it in a way that you don't have to read all several hundred pages of the document and participate in every process, but just understand your neighbor, do the same. So go in the county and see what your current land use is and your current zoning, and then you can look specifically at the general development plan on the website and see what they're recommending for your property. And to that note, to that end, just land use changes. And somebody may not have requested a land use change, but the staff may recommend it. And in that event, you are potentially at risk for, more likely than not, a downzoning or a change from than any type of thing without requesting it. So it's very important for people to take a look and see what their current zoning is, what the county is proposing, because it might change and you may not have asked for that change. So yeah, I think if people focus on their own properties is a good start, but I agree with you. It's a big, intimidating document. I mean, it's been going on for, it's a lot to take in.
Any more thoughts on that balance, economic growth and environmental protection?
Yeah, Mark, this is Elvia Thompson.
Hey, Elvia.
Hi. So, and I realize that most of you are not in that world, but I just want to point out that if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's how important it is for us to have open spaces and nature, unaffected nature. Of life that we have now, if we continue to tear down forests and completely disregard the effect of development on the environment. And I personally am very happy that environmental issues, because everybody's out there trying to make a living. I understand that. But if we don't have clean air and clean water, nothing else matters. And that's been quite brought to the forefront, wide disease. So I think that it is very important. I also, for years, have really been upset by the word growth. I think that what we ought to be looking for is not growth, but vibrancy. Growth implies that we can continue to, and we can't. It's not infinite. Resources are not infinite. So anyway, I look forward to a vibrant community, a vibrant economic scene, but I don't like the word growth. And that's just my 2 cents.
Pick up on something you said, Elvia, which I think was interesting, is the pandemic. Well, let me, before I go to that, is that what's so crucial is this balance that we've got to look at between environmental stewardship, protection, growth / vibrancy. And that's what the plan attempts to do. Where it's difficult, and this ties in a little bit to what Dave was saying, and is into the weeds to make policies to work. Right now, the net result, one of the things that the plan pushes is the concept of density and utilizing existing facilities, so we don't have to, go into the environment, these more pervious surfaces and the like. But what we're seeing, and we will continue to see because of the pandemic, is a movement away from density. That people don't want to be in a dense area because of the pandemic and the issue. And I think that may be a near-term thing, it may be longer term. We're also going to see a movement of demand for less commercial space the way that we know it. We're going to see a lot of vacant businesses that just didn't make it. So the plan needs to address those issues, and it's hard because we don't know what's going to happen into the future with economic activities, political things, and things of that nature. So it's important to have flexibility in the plan, and that's something I think that it's important across the board. The other piece, and I appreciate your comment about vibrancy, is we don't want to disturb as little as we can. But in order to run the government and the county, any community has this issue, is the balance of ratables versus the base. And if the base isn't growing, the property tax, income tax isn't growing, and the government isn't going to have the ability to provide the services. One of the services, can be, public health, education and the like. And the point I guess I'm making, it's a hard balance, and that's what this plan needs to have, balance. And that's where there's some concern from the business community that it may be overly emphasizing environmental protection, and it needs to be more focused on how to help grow the economy, particularly now.
Well, I'm just going to say one more thing and then I'll be quiet, I promise. And that is that the environment and economic activity do not have to be enemies. They do not have to still protect the natural world. And
no, I think you're absolutely right. And that's some of the things I think we're going to look to reflect in our comments from the chamber, is those items that are policies that can do both. And again, I think the focus has been a lot more on environmental. We haven't had enough people involved to focus on how do we do economic growth, vitality in a way that does respect the environment, and that we have a reasonable balance.
Yeah, Mara, I agree. And Elliot, thank you for your comments. I think that one of the things I started with is that we don't want to just disregard or set aside the need to for the built environment's impact on our communities. And to your point about the environmental concerns pairing up and being in balance with the development, vibrancy models, I think they are out of balance in as much as right now the burden on development to put certain stormwater and mitigation measures in place in some instances are cost prohibitive. So while you might want open space, there's going to be some development, there's a need for that. Those folks are not inclined to take on those costs because it doesn't work financially for them. So older aging infrastructure of stormwater management facilities we have, they get outdated and they don't function properly, and then nothing gets done. And so I agree with you. I think there could be certain incentives to encourage development that has these best practices that also preserve green space, address stormwater runoff and help right now. This document definitely favors preserving the environment without providing, at least from my perspective, the necessary incentives to, as you said, together. And that's where we're looking for some input. But thank you again for your comments.
One of the things a comprehensive plan establish the guidelines, and a lot of times they're meant to be purposeful, but they're geared in an ideal world. And some of the things that are focused on this plan is more on transit-oriented development, which is very popular across different types of transit. Couple points, I'll just throw this out to kind of prompt some discussion, is that the addition of light rail or any other kind of mass transit is a very costly thing to install and then to administer. It has utilization of highways and roads in the lake, but only tends to work in areas of greater density. And again, that's why the transit-oriented development comes in. The other reality is cars aren't going away as much as we and so forth and so on, and create congestion. It's a big part of our economy. It's how we move around. I thought there was a miss in the document, and maybe I didn't catch it, but the movement towards electric cars, it is happening. It is an infrastructure project. It's being done. It will probably start to develop into the near future, but it's not included here. So I guess just kind of throwing that out there, any thoughts or comments on infrastructure investment? So the other piece that happens with a plan of this nature, it starts to direct where the government spending goes. Focus on transit type of situations. You look at the areas around the county that have congestion, and how do we invest those monies, or where we want growth, and that's where the road investments might be, or transit, I should just say. So what's some general thoughts about infrastructure, particularly traffic? Well, this is unusual. Usually,
Mark,
The,
this is Art Ebersberger.
hey, Art.
Hi. I would tell you that, we've been behind the ball for decades on traffic. And, when the original plans for highways and roads were maybe 2 cars, then we bought cars for the kids. And so we immediately under-anticipated what the growth was going to be. And so without mass transit, be it light rail or a extremely difficult to catch up with where we are, because for every family that comes in, it's going to be 2 cars, could be 3, could be even 4. You cannot catch up with that volume being put in place. And because the county is relatively affluent, it's difficult to say that you're going to have less cars. It just isn't going to happen that way. I mean, we were out of the box wrong, and got to have a paradigm change. You got to put in mass transit that's of a quality that the people will choose to ride it and use it, as opposed to looking at that being for the the less socioeconomic group, uh, that's having pretty hard in order to make a major paradigm change, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty focused on the automobile to get us around. During the pandemic, I don't know if the Amazon Plus truck or the UPS truck has showed up at your house, but they've showed up here a few times, and that's how we get product and good around, and it's just part of the way that we operate.
Yeah, yeah, definitely behind in terms of traffic and addressing the economic, I guess, needs with mitigating traffic. Specifically, kind of calls on these pockets throughout the county, spread out pretty far in terms of the county, for these town centers or focused concentrations of development. And the problem with that is people will be relying on those areas only for the necessities of groceries, retail, their basic shopping needs, going to be driving on the roads more and longer distances. So I think one of the things that the plan should consider is putting those convenience or those lifestyle necessities closer to where people live and spreading them out versus concentrating them. And that will keep people from driving 15, 20 minutes and making a 5-minute drive and just doing a little loop. And yeah, I agree with you. Some paradigm shift is absolutely critical, and I hope that we see that one day. But and yes, this is a 20-year outlook. I think that's a much longer term project. So in the meanwhile, we should try and incorporate into the plan ways to allow people or give people the options not to have to be on the roads for so long.
Mark, I found it stunning that for so many years and county execs we've had, that we've maintained our public transportation route up and down Ritchie Highway, but have not switched it to up and down I-97, where the major employment has occurred. And we've been in that model since the baby boom years, but haven't grown up and changed it now that we're in the Facebook years. And I have no answer why people haven't recognized that that's what we need to do.
Well, that sounds like a good comment that we'll capture and see how we might be able to work that into our submission to the county. And to Stephen's point, the concept of, and relates to what Art was talking about, is the use of the vehicle, is that by concentrating retail and commercial into one particular area, be it a town center or a TOS or what have you, TOD, the other folks who are in quote unquote the hinterlands or suburbia, they do then have to travel to those places. And again, the congestion on the roads and so forth. So the idea of integrating into a residential type of situation, commercial, is important because it creates that balance. And again, as we move forward, this is a 20-year kind of focus, and we are going to move into a new trend. WFH, working from home. How many of us have been doing that now, and that is going to continue. So having amenities closer by to residential areas that are reasonably planned. I mean, there is that word planning and protecting the environment, but it needs to be integrated into part of this. because it's going to be part of our new normal, that we're going to have. So I think that's a good suggestion about looking at where the transit routes are and then how to spread out the lifestyle accessories that people need.
I would almost challenge the notion of this town center idea. If you think about it, Glen Burnie Town Center, which started in '86, Glen Burnie Town Center has failed. We may be on our third try. Odenton Town Center has never gotten legs and still is stuck in the mud. And I think we can say that Annapolis has succeeded, but you have to recall that Annapolis Town Center, under Janet Owen's administration when it started, was supposed to incorporate some level of a transportation hub, but it was excluded. So this notion of town centers and having people not have to move closer, not have to go far to where they shop, I'm not so sure that that's a believable story.
Yeah, I guess there's three, real life examples. You can look at it how they worked out or did worked out. I think there's some aspects of it that were good and some aspects of the town center that haven't borne out to be successful. Let me kind of backtrack a minute. Who is, again, given the volume of this, the plan itself and the ongoing process, who's had an opportunity to participate in the past? I know probably Elvia may have. Has anybody had an opportunity to comment or attend any of the meetings that have happened? I know I had gone to one or two of them just to kind of observe and listen, and you hear a lot. You get a lot of input, which I think the county executive and council wants, which is a good thing. But we're moving into this phase where we're going to get into a lot of the technical nature of the plan, and so again, that's why we're trying to get a little bit more involved to offer our input for this. So who haven't we heard from that may want to share some thoughts? I'm going to reach out to Shane. I see Shane, you've joined us. Anything you want to add to the conversation? Okay.
Mark, let me ask this question. Steve, you're on top of this, and probably Dave, but the number of goals that you went through, is there a prioritization of those goals? Are they, by the, the order that they're presented? Is that the prioritization? Or, it seems, when you have that many goals, you should have some degree of prioritization of what it is you're trying to be sure you do it about, the economy itself. Is there any thought that's been focused there?
There has, Art, and I'll show you real quick. The background data that I mentioned to you,
Right.
all of this, you can see where it says responsible departments. Here, sorry. You have the responsible departments, the time frames, and then the performance measures. For each one of these, it's basically, I think they've prioritized it. It doesn't say this is a priority, this isn't, specifically, but they've laid that out in terms of timeline.
Right,
so
I mean, let's see,
I agree.
are not in order of priority.
They're not in order of priority. I think they're just, numbered categorically. I don't think the priority is, time has been taken into account in this portion of the plan, the time frame for implementing. But I don't think they've specifically said priority number 1, 2. I don't think that's the case.
Would that be a helpful approach to try and prioritize them, 40 that you're sure that you took care of the ones that really focus, whether it be on the environment or be on the economic, rehabilitation, let's say, the rehab of the Glen Burnie, where infrastructure is already in place. Is that a priority for this, for the county and looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that getting, I'm not sure how they could necessarily to the private
Sector to make it happen.
Right. So I guess they could encourage it. And there are, Councilwoman Allison Pickard had nice legislation that an overlay. These things don't exist in a vacuum, so the incentives need to all be Lyon County and the community for the private sector to act. And yeah, I think specifically calling out, these are our priorities. You can actually look in the, not to waste your time, but the old plan from 2009, they when they were preparing and early in the process, they went through and they had these same strategies laid out last go around. It's something they typically do. And they showed where they were in the process, so whether something was complete or in process or it's changed. So they do track it. Better. I think it's a good observation of what the priorities should be.
Yeah. Well, in the past, they've used revenue development bonds, as you know, for certain areas that they wanted to see the growth to occur, which was the instance, okay, I want to touch this, and I can make the numbers work if I get this type of financing. Financing being as low as it is right now, they may have some other creativity they have to look at, but they've got the tools. I just was wondering whether they had said that, well, this is this area of the county where we've got the infrastructure, we don't have to disturb the environment, and it needs to be redone because people were being underserved.
So those areas have been identified in the plan. They have categorized certain I forget what they call them, prioritization areas, and I'll show you real quick. And I think we're running out of time here, but the county, if you look here, they've identified the critical economic, town center, village center overlay, transit oriented. These are the areas where they intend to see development, redevelopment, and where they, I assume, maybe I shouldn't, they'll have those incentives you're talking about to encourage that.
Gotcha.
Coming up at 11 o'clock, Mark, so.
Yeah, so we've covered a lot, and there's a lot more to be covered. But again, we want to be respectful of folks' time. So prior to kind of concluding, does anyone here before final remarks? Okay, well, I wanted to thank Stephen for taking the time to kind of give us that framework for start this process to develop a document. Hopefully it's not going to be 300 pages, but it'll be hopefully some level of summary to add value to the discussion. And again, this is a discussion because it's a balancing act of economic growth, create rate, while the community isn't sustainable and attractive unless the environment is in good hands and stewardship and protected. So it's this balancing act. So from our perspective, you know, it's not the business guys against the environmentalists. It's a matter of having it down the pike and being able to be flexible to follow market forces and protect the environment. So that's our challenge, to kind of put that in some kind of format that we can submit to the county. And when we do have that done, obviously we'll share that with the membership. And our due date is coming up, November 15th. So that's our next steps. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time out this morning to share some thoughts, and we stay tuned. So with that, everybody have a good day, and look forward